So many people are decades into their career and then they realize they're actually kind of miserable, or they're not passionate about what they're doing and they can be doing so much more, or they're meant to do something else. If you hate it, leave. Like, what's stopping you? You're the only one stopping you. I think a mistake that people usually make is they'll just get straight into updating their resume and applying for jobs. That's where you don't have a lot of intention.
What's your recommendation or advice to people that are feeling stuck?
One of the biggest things they mentioned was really helpful was,
So my next guest is someone who's been guiding careers as well. She has a role at Microsoft, has been doing phenomenal in her journey, but she's also been instructing and guiding so many other people in their career journeys. And we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about the importance of networking and how easy it is to get started. A lot of people overcomplicate it. We're also going to talk about how you have to take on the role of a seller and a marketer. Those are absolutely critical. If you can't sell yourself and you can't market yourself, these opportunities aren't going to land in your plate. So you have to understand how to do that. So networking becomes essential. We're going to talk about a career walking deck. Karen has instructions on how you can build that. The importance of what a career walking deck looks like. We talk about mindset, or even having a growth mindset, and determining what your next path needs to be. We talk about midlife crisis, why it's okay for you to reinvent yourself at a certain point. We're going to talk about all of this, whether you're trying to start a new business, a new career, or just get a new job or a promotion. All of this in this episode. You don't want to miss this. Hi everyone, today we're here with Karen Ngo from Microsoft, and we're going to be talking about all things careers. Karen, quick intro from yourself first, and welcome to Tea Talks.
thanks. It's good to see you, TJ. So my name is Karen, and my personal philosophy is growing 1% every day through finding inspiration to share with the world. So very passionate about career development in general. I joined Microsoft as a new grad back in the pandemic time. So it was very different and lots of things that I learned, but I got to connect with hundreds of people over the years, and I've just learned so much from them. So happy to pay it forward in any way I can.
Love it, love it. And I think one of the areas we're going to touch on for sure is going to be networking and connecting with people. But before we even get into that, I think recognizing that we have to actually connect with people is I would say, a mindset per se. And so what's your recommendation or advice to people that are feeling stuck? They don't know where to go. They don't know where to start. They don't even know what the first thing that they need to be doing is. What are your thoughts on that?
Totally. I think when I have faced these things, or when I've talked to other people who are feeling kind of stuck in a rut, one of the biggest things they mentioned was really helpful was, number one, lots of self-reflection and kind of just asking yourself some of the questions like, what gives you energy? What are the things that don't give you energy? So energy drainers, and how can you move away from those things in your day to day? And then also just going out and talking to different people. They don't have to be people in your current industry or in your current space, but actually going out and volunteering or taking on different projects, just talking to people to understand what else is out there. Because a lot of times you can actually find a lot of inspiration, but also you can also find a lot of other people that you can talk to, and they can give you referrals too.
Yeah, I love that. And, just a simple example of volunteering. So it's like, no one's giving me an opportunity. Everyone needs volunteers, right?
Exactly.
And that opens up networks, that opens up, I guess, new connections and new avenues per se, where people actually now have the ability to go in and try, learn, and understand new things that they might have never explored before.
Exactly. And you also get a chance to build new skills that you maybe wouldn't get exposure to, like you just mentioned. And from there, you're able to understand if you actually like the work that you've been doing and whether you want to pursue it further.
Yeah, no, it's quite fascinating. And one of the things I talk about is clarity, right? And clarity is so important in terms of understanding what your next step is or what your move is. So exactly what you're talking about, the networking, the connection building, having those experiences from others that you get will allow you to gain some sort of clarity, whether it's something you want to do or something you don't want to do. That's also clarity.
Exactly.
And so what are your thoughts on how people can obtain clarity fairly quickly? Because I find that their heads down, they're busy, they're stuck, and they just don't have a moment to even put their head up and look for that clarity and how to even start with that. What are your thoughts there, Karen?
For sure. I think a good way, similar to what I mentioned earlier about doing a little bit of that introspection, is putting together a career walking deck. So a career walking deck is a really great way for you to kind of consolidate everything you know about yourself, where you want to go, all your different learnings into one place. And it's a great asset where you can bring it into an interview, or you can bring it into a coffee chat where you're like, hey, this is who I am. This is where I'm looking to go next. Like, where do you think I can go based off of what you see? And it's a really great tool for telling your story. And once you're able to come to a point where you gone through the exercise, you've done the reflection, you can put together a story, you get a lot more clarity on what makes sense for you. And as you're talking to other people, they'll also help you connect those dots to that story that you're building.
I love that. And how does someone get started on building such a deck?
So I have a lot of resources on my blog, but also I like it's actually a topic that I learned when I first came to Microsoft. My onboarding buddy, he was the one that was like, "You should build one of these." I've talked to other leaders; they were like, "This is a great tool to have." I think just starting out with like, "Who are you?" Just having like a one pager is usually a good starting point on what are your interests, where do you want to go, what are some of your biggest achievements, and kind of from there, like building it with some pictures, and then with the other slides that you put into a career walking deck, you can kind of elaborate a little bit more on like what is this role that you're trying to go to, or what is the space you want to go into, whether it's going out on your own and starting your own business, which is so exciting, or pivoting into a different industry. But I think just showing a little bit more of like what are the connections you want to make and putting all of that in one place. But yes, got lots of resources, lots of templates online in case people need help.
Love that. I'll put that in the descriptions as well, so people can actually go up to that blog and download these resources. I'm gonna, touch base on AI. I know
Mhm.
AI is huge; it's everywhere, especially organizations like Microsoft. I speak about AI all the time. So I want to get your perspectives on how AI is going to shape or reshape careers.
The biggest thing that people are worried about is how AI is going to take over their jobs and they're going to end up with nothing. But I think a better perspective or a better way of looking at AI in the future of work is really how it's going to take away the mundane. And so, how I think about it is you want to find a way to automate yourself out of those mundane tasks and things that you don't really like to do, and so that you can focus your time on things that are more strategic or higher impact. And so for me, I've always loved automating things. I love using AI to do all the things where I'm not really interested in doing it, and now I have extra time that I can spend on something else that I am more interested in and can help me build my career. So I think that's a way that people can kind of look at it. And AI is really smart and savvy, but it still doesn't have that human context yet. And so that's kind of where we can come in more of a strategic advisor, use AI to kind of do the grunt work, but then we're still there taking that information and developing into insights that are relevant to the environment that we're in.
Yeah, no, I love that, and one of the things I talk about even when I'm doing my keynotes, is that the naming of Microsoft's AI, which is Copilot, they've kind of set the framework and said, hey, listen, like you're in charge still. Like the AI is a co-pilot, and I love absolutely, that aspect of it. And I think that's exactly what you're alluding to is leverage AI, use it to enhance your career development or journey,
Mhm.
but don't rely on it solely. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think you really still need to have that context, right? Like, even if AI can write a blog post for you or do your coding for you, you still need to know what a good blog post looks like. You still need to know what good code looks like. And so that's not something that you can just rely completely on something else. Like, you need to bring in that context and you still need to be a subject matter expert.
Absolutely. One of the struggles I have with AI is no matter how many times you tell it, it could give you the best code, and you're like, I'm not sure if this is right. It will actually just change it up because it self doubts itself, right? It
Yeah.
assumes you're right, and it knows that it doesn't have the exact answers, and it'll start hallucinating and making up things as well. So, to your point, you have to be the subject matter expert. Otherwise, you're going to lose out if you blindly trust on this AI technology. Yeah.
Definitely.
One of the other areas I want to touch on is that a lot of professionals wait for opportunities, right? And the times that I've been successful is when I have not waited. I've actually picked up the initiative, gone in and started either digging or trying to navigate through different roles, positions, or parts of the organization deliberately, trying to understand what's out there, what's happening, what are the opportunities. Most individuals sit there and wait and say maybe the right opportunity will land in my
Mhm.
plate, and then I'll jump on it. What are your thoughts?
I totally agree. I think that's one of the reasons why you're so inspiring is because you just go out there and get it done. And I think that is probably one of things that makes someone successful is how they have that hunger, they have that drive, and they're willing to go and get it done. Whether it's something like talking to somebody to make that connection and moving on to the next step, or just trying it out yourself and figuring out how do you even do this in the first place. I think that's really important. For me personally, when it comes to career development, and just moving quickly, it's really the power of connection. Talking to people really helps you build different areas of skill, competencies, and context around different areas where you may not be as privy to. And you kind of just start figuring out this is how all the dots connect, and this is how I play a role in the bigger picture.
You're spot on, and I think you've touched on another aspect again, which is the networking and connection piece, right? So I'm going to go into that one now. A lot of individuals struggle with getting visibility, right? So either making the right connections. We talked about volunteering
Mhm.
to a certain extent, and that's an easy route in. But within the corporate space, within the organizations, what's your advice on how people can go out there, get the visibility, make themselves known, so that they actually are primed for the opportunities that come up?
I think a great one, speaking to what we were talking about earlier, like volunteering or just joining communities, that's a great chance to meet people more organically. Sometimes people are hesitant to send like a cold email to someone and ask for time. But if you've already met them at an event, it's a really easy way to be like, hey, I really enjoyed learning about you at this talk or going to your event, and I would love to continue the conversation. And that's a little bit more organic, and people usually are more open and receptive to that. But even if you are trying to connect to someone who you've never met before, I think it's really worth shooting your shot because a lot of times people are willing to give it forward. They're open to doing it. They're just super busy.
Of
And
course.
so oftentimes we feel that if we're getting ghosted or rejected, it's on us, but really the other person's just super busy. And it's not that they don't want to help you, but maybe they can refer you to someone else, or it'll just take time for you to get some time on their calendar.
Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me of two things. One, and that's a quicker one, is that's really a sales skill, right? Is really getting yourself, comfortable, and then putting yourself out there, and then facing rejection multiple times until you get that response. And one of these
Mhm.
examples is, you talked about joining communities for that visibility. When I was at Microsoft, I was actually a member of the Asians at Microsoft community,
Mhm.
and as a key role in that organization, I was head of partnerships. And in those partnerships, we had an organization called Ascend that we were
Mhm.
part of. And the chapter lead for Ascend at the time was a gentleman by the name of Manjeet Singh, who was the chief financial officer at Sun Life at the time. And he became my first guest on my podcast when I went and launched, right? So to your point, those communities bring new opportunities and new connections that you've never even thought about before, and you don't know where you're going to intersect or overlap with them, but they may present as opportunities. So it's a great example that you've shared, and that's something I share in my coaching programs as well. Is
Mhm.
how do you deliberately set yourself up strategically, right, to be in a position where you're joining these communities, you're joining these organizations, you're volunteering, you're getting in front of other people,
Mhm.
whether it's internal, whether it's external, and then those opportunities start coming up, and you start getting thought of in places that you never thought of before, right? So someone else is raising their hand on your behalf and saying, I think that TJ guy might be a good idea for this. Or Karen, does some phenomenal work here. I've seen her in action. Let's see if she's interested. And that's where those opportunities come up front.
For sure. And it's also important to actually ask for that mentorship or sponsorship sometimes because, like I said earlier, people are very busy. They're not always going to be looking out for you. Of course, some people will, and great leaders will do that. But sometimes finding a great sponsor is actually asking directly, like, can you speak up for me when I'm not in the room? And that's kind of where that value can come into.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this, I mean, if you encompass it, I classify it as personal branding, right? You're
Mm.
going out there, you're telling other people what you stand for, who you are, what you believe in, and now they're aware, and now they're speaking on your behalf. And that's
Mhm.
that's where a lot of my business comes in from that as well today, is that someone would come in and say, well, you know what, I'm not sure who the right person is for what you're asking for, but I know TJ's been talking about this, or he might
Mm.
be the right fit for it. And that's where a lot of the referrals start coming in, and that personal branding piece is so important. People overlook it. They think, I'm not a marketer, or I'm not someone in sales, but those are the skills that matter if you want to excel and get ahead in your career today.
Yes. And I love your posts all the time. They're really great to look into.
Awesome, thank you. And so, all of that we've kind of talked about requires, I think, a certain type of mindset. And that's, I love what Satya always talks about as a growth mindset, right? And that's kind of what the philosophy at Microsoft was, and I learned a lot from that during my tenure here as well. That growth mindset allows you to understand that you have limitations, and through those limitations you have to find opportunities and gaps, and you have to fill those. How do you recommend individuals who are looking at their career journey to identify what those gaps are? what those opportunities are, and how do you now take that growth mindset and apply that strategically to your own career growth?
For sure. I think a topic or an interesting philosophy that's come up these days is the founder mode or startup mentality. And that's kind of where you're really taking ownership of what's yours. So, in this case, your career, and how do you grow and scale it as fast as you can in a way that's still sustainable and still authentic to who you are. So, I think that is pretty interesting. And I think if I was looking at how do you approach career development with a growth mindset, it's being willing to challenge the narrative you've had this entire time. So many people are decades into their career and then they realize they're actually kind of miserable or they're not passionate about what they're doing and they can be doing so much more or they're meant to do something else. And I think the big thing is it's never too late to make a change. And I've seen many people who have done that, but it's being open to acknowledging that in the first place. Because sometimes if you're going to keep living in denial, you're just going to keep climbing up the corporate ladder in a place that doesn't even suit who you are. But if you're willing to be authentic to that and reflect on it, then you come back into, okay, now I know what my personal philosophy is, and I'm going to try to figure out what aligns most to that and pursue opportunities that are more relevant. So I think a big part is figuring out what your personal philosophy is in the first place.
I love that, and that was part of my journey as well. There was a time, and I just did a post this morning about my journey. At 13, I wanted to be, at Microsoft, and that was just incredible dream that I wanted to be a part of, and I fulfilled it. But I'm no longer 13,
Mm.
and that dream changes, right? And people forget that what they started out with, they're not the same person anymore. They've got
Mhm.
kids, they've got family, they've got other obligations and other priorities. It's like, how do you now reshift that? And it's okay for individuals to go in and say, okay, let me reassess where I stand today and maybe now create a new plan. A lot of them feel stuck and they feel that that's not something that they can get out of. And, what we call midlife crisis in terms.
Yeah.
Most of my clients come in with, well, I've done this my whole life. Now what? Right? And they don't realize that they can step back, reassess, leverage the skills and the background that they already have and build something new or get into a role that actually satisfies their actual needs and requirements. So, what you're saying there is absolutely spot on, and I think it's important for people to recognize that they can step back and pivot.
Exactly. And you spend way too much time at work for it to not mean anything. And I think about a conversation I had with Kara Swisher, and she was actually talking about if you hate it, leave. Like, what's stopping you? You're the only one stopping you from
Yeah.
leaving.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And that was the decision I had to make, right? I got to a point where it wasn't fulfilling enough and I said, you know what? I have to leave. I have to make a change.
Mhm.
And it's never easy, but staying in the role isn't easy either, right?
Exactly.
And
Choose your hard.
well, that's exactly it. Choose your
Mhm.
hard. And a lot of organizations that people do work for, they don't realize that these organizations have a role for every individual. So
Mhm.
if there's something else that you're seeking, something different, then you need to go put yourself out there, network, connect, and find those other opportunities. They might not be present the same day, but in several weeks, months, or within a couple of years, these opportunities start coming up and they serve as new avenues for you to go down. But that requires you to be deliberate now, not wait till the
Mhm.
last minute and say, okay, now I need something and try to scramble for something. The next aspect I want to touch on, Karen, is wrapping all of this up in a I guess a bow, if you will, or a container, is how do people walk through all of this? I know we talked about, the career walking deck. We talked about networking. We talked about visibility. We talked about a lot of different components of it. Your path on what those step by step should be. Like, what's the first thing people should look at and start with? Because taking all of this on at the same time is very difficult.
It is, for sure. I think a mistake that people usually make is they'll just get straight into updating their resume and applying for jobs. And that's where you don't have a lot of intention. People at this point are maybe a little bit desperate for, I just need something different. I need to make a move, but I don't know what it is. And that's something that they think is a quick win. But I would say it's really important to actually pause, take a step back and like remove yourself from everything. Like some people will actually go on like a hiatus for a while and really do some soul searching, which I know sounds a little bit funny, but it's time where you're actually reflecting on what is the meaning of everything. And I think unless you're really connected to that core of who you are, you have that personal philosophy really figured out, you're always going to be in this spot where you're questioning why you're doing things and whether it has any meaning to what you're doing. So I think if you're looking for the first step to do, it's really reflecting and identifying what is your personal philosophy, which is essentially a mission statement that you can resonate with. Like every morning you get up and you're like, this is why I'm here. And once you get to that point, it's like, okay, now how do you build a brand? How do you build a story around it? That's where career walking duck comes into play. You're able to kind of develop a visual story. And this is something you can then showcase when you're talking to people, when you're meeting people, going into an interview, or like just presenting to people in general. So then that's how you start building your brand slowly. And as people start understanding who you are, they'll be able to look out for opportunities or they'll be able to give you ideas on how you can pursue it further. And that's where the connection comes into play. You keep talking to people, you keep your mind open to different possibilities. And from there, the momentum kind of keeps building. I think that's really important. And of course, all the other assets like your resume, cover letter, those things are important when it's time to apply for the job and it's necessary. But I've actually found that you don't actually always need those things. If you have the right connections and you already have that rapport built because your personal brand is so strong, sometimes they'll even hire you without the resume or cover letter.
Absolutely. I don't think I think the last time I used my resume for a position was when I started at Microsoft. And
Wow, that's
after
a long
that,
time ago.
internally, yeah, it was about 15 years ago. And after internally, any moves that I had, the resume was just, a reference for a discussion during the interviews, if you will. But it was really about who I was and
Hmm.
what the potential was. And most people hire for what someone's potential is, not what they've done in the past.
Hmm.
And the resume is a reflection of that. And this is why and I don't know if you've seen my posts online, but I talk about the resume is dead, right?
Yes.
That personal brand outweighs any resume any day. And if any of my students that I work with, I ask them the same question. I said, listen, if you had two individuals, two candidates, one had a phenomenal resume, but no online presence, and the other one had a mediocre resume, but a phenomenal online presence, who would you hire?
Hmm.
And they all gravitate towards the person who has that online presence, whether it's on LinkedIn or any other social. It shows that they've got the power of brand building. And they recognize that that's who they would hire, but they don't go and apply to themselves and say, this is what I need to do for myself, right? So it's so critical for us to recognize the power of that brand, especially going into this next era, right? We have all the tools, we have the social platforms, we have the technology. It's very easy to just get going and start,
Hmm.
crafting your thoughts. But a lot of people are afraid of being judged. They fear that what are their peers going to think about them? What are their family members going to think about them? I personally had that same fear as well when I started.
Totally.
And I ripped the bandit off one day and I said, okay, let me go in. And I started, and that was it. That fear is what holds us back, irrespective if it's a new role, irrespective if it's a career change that we're trying to do, if it's a social branding experiment we're trying to do. And it's an
Hmm.
experiment. Sometimes you try, they don't work out the way you want them to. Well, that's okay, right? You move on with that. But if you let fear hold you back, you're not moving.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of like from talking to so many leaders and people who I am very inspired by, including yourself, I think a big thing is that even if you are scared, like you try it out and you kind of see what you learn from it, right? Like there's no failure, only feedback. And I think people who are willing to put themselves in that state of vulnerability actually come out a lot more confident because they've already hit rock bottom and they've recovered from it and they see that they're still fine. And with that renewed confidence, you're then able to kind of tackle anything and everything that comes at you. And it's a story worth telling when you're in an interview or in a coffee chat. It makes you so much more interesting.
Absolutely. And that's where I think building that connection with the interviewer or the hiring manager is so critical. If you
Mhm.
don't hit it off well with them, it goes nowhere. And I remember my last interview that I did for a role that I was changing at Microsoft. Nothing was asked about the actual role or the work itself. It was about who I am, what I
Mhm.
enjoy, how the manager and I had the same vision. We aligned on what the growth was going to be for the department and the team, and that's what got me the opportunity more than, how do you react when this happens, or
Mhm.
how do you behave in this scenario. No scenario based question. It was really
Wow.
a business discussion and a conversation, and that's what allowed me to move into a lot of the different roles. And even in my career, I went from our enterprise services group to sales to marketing to leadership. a lot of people struggle with moving within their own organization. So
Mhm.
building that personal brand, I'll go back to that again, is so critical. Not being afraid of failure, right, is so critical. I remember when I took on the IoT role, one of the questions I was asked was that I don't really have a marketing background, and I said it's not gonna scare me
Mhm.
off. I'm gonna roll up my sleeves. I'll learn it, figure it out, and go through it. And then the technology and the technical background I already had, so I combined and paired the two up.
Ooh.
Wasn't afraid, went in with it, and and excelled and did really well in that aspect of it, only because that fear wasn't there, right?
Mhm.
If that fear was there of, do I have this? Am I going to be able to do it? It's going to hold us back. So
Exactly.
identify it as a gap and understand that we have to build a bridge to get over it. And once we recognize that with that growth mindset that we spoke about earlier, it allows us to get over and seek new opportunities and adventures.
Mhm.
So, Karen, thank you again. Great conversation. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. This is going to go into a rapid fire segment.
Okay.
So, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, one word answers, if you can. And so, we'll start with the first one's always easy: coffee or tea?
Tea.
Oh, you're a tea person as well, just like me. Perfect. Early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
Okay. One word to describe careers in the world of AI.
Evolving.
Okay. Biggest career mistake professionals make.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Complacency.
Okay. Best leadership trait in one word.
Um, Growth.
Okay. And if you could speak to animals and any animal outside of any pets you own, which
Mhm.
one would you want to speak to?
I'd love to talk to an elephant.
An elephant.
Yes.
That's the first time I've heard that one.
Really?
Now I'm curious.
I feel like elephants are very wise. They're so big, but they're so gentle, and they have like their herd and everything. So I'm just curious, like what an elephant's life is like. It's pretty random, but
That is so cool. No, it's fascinating if you think about it. Like they know how big they are. They know the destruction they can cause,
Mhm.
right? But yet they don't,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
That's
So I'm kind
amazing.
of curious
Yeah.
about how they live their lives.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Karen, thank you very much for being here. I absolutely appreciate your time. This conversation, I think, is going to inspire a lot of people as well. Any final words for our guests?
I think a big thing is so many mentors, leaders have told me this is like just go and do it. Like it never hurts to try, it never hurts to fail. The only thing that's stopping you is yourself and this fear that isn't even real. It's just in your mind. So your mind is your prison, but once you let that free, you can kind of achieve so much that you didn't even think was possible.
I love that. Your mind is your prison. And it's so true. Once you let that free, you're as free as you can be.
Hmm.
You can design and create anything you want. You can go talk to anyone you want, right?
Exactly.
That's the beauty of it. So, no, thank you again, Karen. This has been a great conversation. For those listening, I absolutely appreciate you tuning in for more career growth, more AI-driven strategies, for more technology conversations. Tune into Tea Talks. Thank you again, and keep on inspiring.